Hello, this is Justin from the Tech Train here. Almost exactly a year ago today, I published a video which has proved to be one of the most popular ones on the channel, and certainly one that has generated the most number of comments. And this is the PowerPoint presentation that I demonstrated how to produce. Basically, the idea is that it generates a random slide, or it jumps to a random slide somewhere within the presentation. So this example I've got here, for example, has the main screen, Let's Play, and then all of the others have various names on. I've just used A, B, C, D, as you can see, all the way through to Yvette at the end there, so 22 names. Now, if I play this presentation, what happens is I have this Go button, and when I click it, it randomly chooses one of the slides from the presentation. Click it again. It's taken me to another random slide, and once more, there we go. Now, the questions that people have been asking and the comments people have been leaving are to adapt this code slightly so that instead of jumping randomly from one slide to another, it only jumps from one slide to another within a group of slides that you select. So within a set number of slides, let's say a random slide between slides 10 and 15. That's something that's been requested quite a few times. Also, people have asked whether it's possible to have unique random numbers so that you're generating random numbers, you're jumping to random slides, but you're not going to the same slide twice, or at least not until you've been to every other slide. So that's something else people have requested. That's something else that I'm going to address in this video. So what I'm going to focus on in this video is just quickly showing how it is possible to jump to a random slide within a PowerPoint presentation. Then I'm going to go on and show how it's possible to do that, but only within a set group of cells, say the first 10 slides. So I'll show how that's possible, and then I'll go on to show how it's possible to choose a group of slides and randomly jump from one slide to another within that group without having any duplicates, so that you see every slide within that set once and once only. So what I'm going to do is, on the screen right now will be a number of links. So if you've got if you're watching this on YouTube, you should see some buttons or links on the screen right now which will allow you to jump to whichever part of this tutorial you want to focus on. Possibly you might just want to go all the way through this whole tutorial, that's fine. But if you'd like to just jump straight ahead because you've already followed my first tutorial and you want to find out how to extend it or adapt it, then just go right ahead, click on one of those buttons there, and we'll jump straight to that section. So the first section that I'm going to think about now is just quickly, how do we generate this code so that we can jump randomly from one slide to another anywhere within the presentation. So let me very quickly show you how it's possible to create this code that jumps from one slide to another randomly in a random order. First of all, you'll need the developer toolbar at the top there. If you don't have it, then right click anywhere on any tab that you have available, right click anywhere and go to customize the ribbon. And then on the right hand side, you need to make sure that developer, there it is ticked. So make sure that's ticked, and when it is, then you will have the developer toolbar. You then want to come over to the left hand side and click Visual Basic. Once you've done that, you need to type these 3 lines of code. So we've got sub-random, which is a subroutine, basically a little block of code, and we're going to call this random. And then at the end of that little subroutine, we have to have this line that says end sub. So sub-random and then end sub. And then this line of code here. So it's active presentation, in other words, this particular PowerPoint show, dot slideshow window, which is basically the screen that we're looking at now, dot view dot go to slide. There's a space there, so that separates out the 2 parts. So this first section here instructs PowerPoint to go to a particular slide, and then after that we need to say, well, which slide are we going to? So this is where we generate a random number. We need to generate a random number that is between the first slide in our presentation that contains something we want to jump to. So in this case, we don't want to jump to the first slide because that's just our title slide. The first slide we actually want to jump to is this one, slide 2. So we need to make sure that we are jumping from slide 2 right through to the last slide in our presentation. So this little block of code here does that. So first of all, we've got in brackets here RND, which is the code word for random, multiplied by the active presentation.slides.count. That says count up the number of slides in our active presentation. See, code's not that difficult really, is it? So random times that number means calculate a random number between 0, in fact it always goes from 0 up to the maximum number of slides in our presentation, which I believe is 23, is that right? I think there are 23 slides in the presentation. Yes, there are. So it'll generate a random number between 0 and 23. The thing is, we don't want it to be from 0 to 23, so we add 2 to that, so that in fact what we're doing is saying it's from 2 to 22. We're adding 2 to 0, so we skip the 1 and go straight to 2. If you happen to have no title slide at all, then you'd probably want to go from the first slide, so it'll be add 1 instead of add 2. If you had 3 title slides, then you would want to skip the first 3 plus 1 for 0. It means you'd be adding 4. Anyway, that's the code side of things. Once you've written that out, all you have to do is click on the button that you want to be the button that jumps from one slide to another, and if you just simply right click on it and go to hyperlink, you'll have this little panel, and down here it says run macro. To begin with, that won't have anything in it, but if you click on this option to run macro and you click on the drop down list, you will see the name of the subroutine we just created, which is random. So select random, click OK, and basically what you need to do now is to what I would do is copy the slide, or copy this button at least, and place this on every single slide. So basically what I did is I just created this first title slide here, put the hyperlink into this button to the random macro, and then copied this slide as many times as I wanted to, and then changed the individual names, or it could be quiz questions or whatever it might be, numbers, maths questions, onto each one of these slides. So every one of these slides, if I just right click on this button here and go to hyperlink, you can see is running that random macro. So that's basically, I've done that very quickly. If that was a little bit too quick for you, I do apologise. Have a look at the original video. I did do that much more slowly. I spent a lot more time on it. So if you want to go over that a bit more slowly, then feel free to have a look at that original video from last year. But otherwise, that's basically it. That's it, how to generate a button that will jump from one slide to another randomly in some random sequence within PowerPoint. However, the next thing to think about now is how we can select a group of cells, let's say numbers 2 to 5, and just have the button randomly jump from one cell to another within that group, completely ignoring all of the other slides in your presentation. So let's have a look and see how that's possible. So let's think now how it's possible to adapt this code, which we've got here from the original video or from the last section of this video, how we can change it so that instead of jumping from one cell to another anywhere within the presentation, instead what we do is say, okay, I only want for the moment to jump randomly between cells 2 and 6. So I only want to jump between slides 2 and 6. I don't ever want to go to slide 1. I don't ever want to go to slide 7 or any of the ones after that. How is it possible to do that? It's actually fairly straightforward. I know a lot of people have left comments and sent me emails saying, please show me how to do that. So let's have a look at how that's possible. So first of all, what I'm going to do is go to the random subroutine that we've got. I'm just going to force that down for a little bit, because the first thing I want to do is to create a couple of variables. So to declare a variable, we use the word dim, and I want the first variable to record the first slide number within the group that we want to jump randomly between. So I want to jump between slides 2 and 6. So the first slide will be number 2. So the variable will be called first slide, and this is going to contain an integer. We also want to have a second variable which is called last slide. That's also an integer. And then we can write in here what these two variables are. This means, and I know a few people have said, I want to change which group of numbers it is, which group of slides it is. As I go through the course and I add more slides or there's more content, I want to include that in it. So by producing variables like this, we can easily do that. So I'm going to say at the moment, first slide equals 2. And my last slide, the last slide in the sequence that I want to randomly jump between, we're going to have that as 6. So very easily you can at any point jump into the code and change either of these numbers to change the selection of slides that we're randomly jumping between. Now, what we need to do is just change this line of code that we've got down here. So this is the line of code that actually jumps from one slide to another. All of this is fine. However, what we're going to do is, I think the easiest thing to do is just to delete that last bit completely, and we'll retype this. So the first part is, okay, active presentation dot slideshow window dot view dot go to slide. That's absolutely fine. Now what we're going to do is have an integer, so it's obviously going to be a whole number, and then we're going to have last slide, that's our variable there, subtracted from the first slide plus 1. And then we're going to multiply that by RND, that's our random number function, and then we're going to add to that first slide, and then close our brackets, and that's it. So that line of code there, what it basically does is say we'll generate a random number, make sure it's a whole number, and then we're generating a random number between this first slide and the last slide. Don't worry too much about the structure of this. It's a fairly standard structure for generating random numbers with your upper limit, lower limit, upper limit. But basically that's it. You don't need to ever worry about this line of code ever again. If you want to change the group of cells that you're jumping randomly between, just change these two numbers here. Let's have a little look at how this works now. So if I close that, what I should find is that when I play the game, I'm only jumping between cells 2 and 6, which means I'm only jumping between the name beginning with A and the name beginning with E. So let's click go. Okay, so we've jumped to B, that's the second name in the section. There's our E for Eve. Debbie, let's try one more. And Carol, there you can see. So you can see all of those were within those slides 2 to 6. So that's how to generate a random number, or how to generate a random slide number within a set of slides, so within a specific group of slides, and that you can change that very, very easily at any time. If you just jump into Visual Basic and say, okay, they've learnt a little bit more, or a few more students are in the group now, let's have the last slide in the group now as 10. And so this time it'll now randomly choose a slide anywhere between slides 2 and 10. So that's that section. Now the next thing that we need to think about is how it's possible to randomly jump from one cell to another, but without having duplicates. So how can we make sure that we don't duplicate a slide? So we're running around, let's say in this group here, we're running between slides 2 and 6. We'd randomly jump from Anne to Carol to Eve to Debbie, and then we might go back to Carol again, having never actually visited Beryl. Then we might end up seeing Debbie 3 times in a row. So we need to make sure that there's not that duplication. So let's see how it's possible now to make sure that we are going through the sequence or the set of slides that we're saying we want to go through, but without duplicating one, at least not until we've been right the way through all of them, they've all had a turn, and then we can restart the process of going back through all of these. So let's see how that's possible. So now we come on to the biggest challenge of all, and that's how to make sure that not only do we jump randomly between a certain, or within a certain group of slides, so say jumping randomly between slides 2 and 6, but that we make sure that each time we jump to another slide within that group, it's the first time we've jumped to that slide. So in other words, we're not jumping from one slide to another, then perhaps back to the first slide, then to a slide 3 times before going to another one. In other words, we take all these numbers, the 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6, we put them in a list, we shuffle them up, and then we go through that shuffled order so each slide gets visited once and once only until we've been all the way through all of them, and then we can start again. So let's see how it's possible to do that. So we go to Developer and to Visual Basic. And at the moment I'm going to get rid of that line completely, and to be honest, I'm not going to worry too much about this routine. This sub-random is going to shove that down a little bit, because the first thing that we need is to have a couple of variables which are going to be what we call public variables. I have a subroutine here. This little subroutine is called random. But I will need to have another subroutine for this to work. I'm going to call this other subroutine shuffle, for example, just to shuffle all the numbers up. And I need variables to work within both separate subroutines. So if I want a variable to work not just within one subroutine, but also to be recognized by a completely different subroutine, then I have to make those variables public. So I go right to the top, you'll see I'm in the general section, and on the right hand side I'm in declarations rather than in the random subroutine there. I'm in declarations right at the top. And instead of typing dim and then the variable name, what I do is I write public. That makes it public, it makes it open, that all the subroutines within this particular part of the program will recognize and be able to use those variables. I'm going to call this one position, so that's just a standard variable. And then what I'm also going to do is create another one, and I'm going to call this all slides. But I'm going to put 2 brackets after it, and I'm going to make that as an integer. The 2 brackets basically mean that this is an array. So whereas this variable here is a single variable, this as an array is a whole list of variables, and every one of those variables is called all slides. But the first one of those variables will be called all slides, and in brackets 0. The second one of these variables called all slides will have a 1 in the brackets after it, and so on. And I can then work my way through all of those variables in order. I can see what's in any one of those variables by referring to its number, and this is basically what we refer to as an array. So I've made those 2 variables there, or 1 variable and an array, as public variables. The next thing I'm going to do is create a new subroutine, and I'm going to call this shuffle. So make a little bit of room. And the bit of code that I had down here in random, I'm just going to grab that and I'm going to paste it straight up into Shuffle. So again, as before, I've got a couple of variables. These ones I don't need to make public. They're only going to be used within this routine here. So dim first slide as integer, so that's the first slide within the group. Dim last slide as integer, the last slide within the group. Let's say I'm going to randomly jump between slides 2 and 6, as I did before. So that's got that one in there. Fine. Okay, the next thing I need to do is to have another variable called dim this slide, which is going to keep track of the slide I'm on. This is going to be an integer as well. All slides are just simply numbers between 0 and whatever, it's whole numbers. Right, now we also need dim range as integer. This variable here will contain the number of slides within the group, which is basically 6 minus 2 in this case. So it's that how many slides are in that group. We can actually say this. We'll say range equals, and then we'll just put this in brackets perhaps. It's the last slide in the group minus the first slide, of course. So the 6 minus 2 in this case. So there's the range. Now, once I've worked out the range, what I need to do is to make sure that this array has enough slots in it, enough positions in it, if you like, for me to be able to hold all of the numbers between, in this case, the 2 and the 6. So this all slides array, think of it like a list, like a shopping list, and it's a numbered shopping list. And it needs to have enough slots for me to contain all the slides from 2 to 3, 4, 5 and 6. So a total there, it has to have 4 positions in that array. So what I do is, we've already declared the array, we've already created that one, but we need to use the word redim, redimension, and this is the variable all slides, I called it. And it's 0 to, and we've just worked out what the range is, so just 0 to range. So that basically says, okay, how many slides are there in a group? Well, it's this number minus this number, so last slide minus the first slide. That's our range. Okay, take our array and make sure that it has enough positions in it that will allow us to count from 0 all the way up to that range. 4 in this particular case, of course. Right, okay, so next what we need to do is to count from 2 to 6, and each time we count we need to put that number, that slide number, into the next position in our array. So let's set up a loop, a for loop. So for I equals, start counting at 0, and we're going to go all the way to range, which is the last slide minus the first slide. So for I equals 0 to range. Now we need to have our variable, our array, so all slides, brackets, position I. So whatever I currently is, it'll start off being 0, then it'll be 1, then it'll be 2, then it'll be 3, and then finally it'll be 4. So all slides at this position, whichever one we're up to, will equal the first slide plus I. So we just need to end that loop with next. What's that doing? Well, first slide is of course the first slide number in our group. That's 2 at the moment. So we're saying to begin with I will be 0. So the all slides array, position 0, is going to equal whatever the first slide number was, in this case 2, plus I. Well, I is 0 at the moment, so it's 2 plus 0, so it's going to be 2. So in other words, the first position in our array will contain the number 2, which is the first slide number. The next one will be 3, of course, so now I counts up to the next number. So after it hits next, it goes back up to the beginning of the loop. Now I equals 1. So all slides array, position 1, equals the first slide, which is the number 2, plus I, which is now 1. 2 plus 1 is 3. So as we count through from 0 all the way up to range, we're counting 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And each time we do that, we're saying whatever the first number of the slide is plus whatever I is. So eventually, when I is 4, we're going to have for I equals 0 to range. So I was 4 in the last time. So all slides position 4 equals the first slide plus 1. So 2 plus 4 will equal 6. Hope that makes sense. Obviously, if anything that I say or do doesn't quite make sense, or you're not quite sure, you want more information, please do leave a comment below. I do read all comments. I try and respond to them as often as quickly as I can. In some cases that's a message, in some cases it's another video which addresses those questions, but do please feel free to leave comments, and I will do my best to help. That's the whole point of these videos. Anyway, let's carry on. So we've got the all the numbers of the slides, the 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. They are now in our array. What we've got to do now is shuffle those up a little bit. So we've got to mix all of those numbers up in our array, and there's pretty standard ways of doing that. You can find code online quite easily for shuffling an array in VBA, but here's the code anyway. So I'm going to say dim n as long, then we're going to have another variable here, dim temp as variant, and then dim j, we'll call it, as long as well. Now I don't have to make those public variables, I'm only using them within this subroutine, so that's fine. Now we need to have the randomized function in there so that every time we run this it's going to randomly choose a different selection of random numbers. Otherwise you can end up finding that every time you run the PowerPoint presentation, yes, it's choosing random numbers, but every single time it's the same sequence of random numbers. So we put the randomized function in there. Now we need a loop, so for n equals L bound or lower bound, that's the lower limit of our array called all slides, and that's going all the way to upper bound or U bound all slides. So it's basically just counting between the first entry in our array to the last entry in our array. Now j equals CLNG, open up 1, 2, 3, we're going to need 3 brackets here, and then again it's the upper bound of our array, all slides, and then we need to minus n, and then we multiply that by our little RND again, and then we plus n. You'll notice that's very similar to the line of code that we had on the previous section where we were randomly jumping from one slide to another. So it's very similar actually code to that, same basic structure. Now if n doesn't equal, that's the greater than and less than signs, j, then temp equals all slides brackets n. And then this is basically just swapping positions over, so all slides brackets n equals all slides, should probably have copied and pasted the word all slides at this point, j, and then all slides brackets j equals temp. What the heck is all that doing? All it's doing is just randomly choosing a particular entry within the all slides array, and then here, as long as the 2 entries next to each other are not the same, it's swapping them over. So it's basically saying put whatever is in all slides at position n into a variable called temp, and then put into n whatever was in j, and then fill j out with whatever was in temp. So it's basically swapping 2 entries within the array over by having a temporary holding place for one of them. And then end if, and then we have our loop starting again. So that now has shuffled up all of the items in our array. The next thing we need to do, if we're going through all of these different slides here in the order, we need to make sure that although this button here, this first one here, puts all the numbers into the array, shuffles it all up, what we don't want is, let's say we go to this slide next, to click on this button and for it to do that all over again. We don't want that. We only want the code we've just written to happen once in our Go button. But after that, each one of these slides will need to keep an eye on the array and to know what is the next number, the next randomly shuffled number in that array list. So we need to keep track of which position we are in the array. So we'll just have, we've already created a variable called position up here, so we're going to use that now. Position will start off as 0, so that's the first entry in our array, or all slides array. And then once we've done that, we can now jump to, have I got that line of code somewhere? No, I got rid of that earlier. So it's active presentation dot slideshow window dot view dot go to slide, and then this is where we used to have the int random thing. This time we don't need to do that. We simply say look at our array, our all slides array, and look at what's at position. Position is currently 0, so this will simply jump to the first position in our array. So don't forget, our array is now shuffled. So whatever these numbers were here, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6, those have all been shuffled up, so we don't know what order they're in now, but we simply jump to whichever slide number is at the beginning of our array list. Now finally, we need the random subroutine that we got down here, because this of course will be linked to all of the other buttons in our slideshow. So whereas this button here will link to the subroutine we've just written called shuffle, all of the other buttons throughout our whole presentation will link to the random subroutine here. This is fairly straightforward, but we need to just add a little more than we had in previous versions of this subroutine. So the first thing we need to do is say position now equals position plus 1. So we've moved on from the first position in our array to the second position in our array, or where are we up to. And don't forget, we can use this variable position even though it was also used in this subroutine because we made it public earlier on. So position equals position plus 1. Now of course, what happens if we are already at the end of our array? We're already at position 4 in our array. If we add 1, we're now looking for position 5 in our array, but our array only has 4 positions. We're going to have an error. So we have to decide what to do. Now you could end the whole thing here and just ignore it, or we could simply start all over again. So I'm going to do that. So if position is greater than U bound or upper bound, the maximum position in our all slides array, then we'll just simply set position back to 0. That's end if, nothing else to do there. So that just simply makes sure that we're not going to end up causing an error by trying to look at a part of our array which doesn't exist. Once we've added 1 to the position, check to make sure that it's a viable number, and if it isn't, we'll set it back to the 0. We now can jump to that slide, and I can simply take this line of code here and copy it straight down there. So active presentation.slideshow.view.goToSlide, all slides array, position. There we go. So this code here is jumping from slides 2 to 6 only. In other words, I'm only going to be going from Anne to Eve. But crucially, I shouldn't see any of these slides twice. So whatever the first one is, I shouldn't see that again until I've seen all of the other slides in the show. So let's give this a little go then. Let's hit F5 and see what happens. One thing I haven't done actually, I just need to do that first, sorry, is to change the links. So on the first slide here, I need to just right click on that and choose hyperlink and make sure that the macro we're using now is the shuffle macro. That's only for the first button, or the first slide, sorry, to get the whole thing started. So that just says, okay, which slides are we going to be randomly choosing? All right, let's shuffle them all up and let's start from the first one now in that list. So we just changed that one. All of the others, they remain exactly as they are with using the random macro. So that's just that one change there. Let's save it. And then let's run the code and see what happens again. So let's play, click on go. Okay, so remember we're only going to be expecting to see those slides between slides 2 and 6. That's between A for Anne and E for Eve. So we've gone on to slide 6. Excuse me, let's click that again. There we are. Now we've seen Anne, so that's the second from our list. There we are. There's Carol, that's 3. Debbie, that's 4. And Beryl, that's 5. So now at this point, we've been all the way through them, and so we're back to Eve again. Now this will actually continue going through. Okay, I'll stop that now. It will continue going through in the same order, but what you can see there is we're, first of all, only randomly jumping between slides within a set group of slides, and secondly, that we are never going to see any of those slides twice before we've been through every single one of them. So once the last one in that random mix has been visited, then we can start again. Now you could, if you wanted to, change that. So if you wanted to do that, then instead of having this line position equals 0, so if position is greater than the upper bound of all slides, then what we could do there, if you wanted to have an end slide that says, whoa, you've finished, you've been through all that, then you could simply have active presentation.slideshow window.view.go to slide, and then in brackets the slide number that you want to go to if you've now visited all of the slides. I hope that makes sense. If that doesn't make sense, you want me to explain how to do that more carefully, please do leave a comment, send me a message, and I will certainly do that for you. I apologise, this has been quite a long video, but I hope that that has answered most of, if not all of, the questions that you've been asking, the comments and requests that people have been leaving for this video, and that gives the opportunity now to create the sort of resources that you're wanting to use. If you do have any questions or suggestions or want me to clarify anything, please do leave a comment below, and I will make sure that I either leave you snippets of code or another video or a little comment. So please do feel free to do that, and I will address those. If you found this useful, if this was helpful to you, then please do leave a little like, click that little like button before you go. And of course, if you've not subscribed yet, please do click that subscribe button. That would be fantastic. So thank you very much indeed for watching. I hope that was useful to you. And if it was, then I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye for now.